What's up, y'all? Welcome to the Chess Giant. This is Solomon Ordell. Today's video, I'm going to be covering round one of my personal games against FIDE master Alexander Krechetov in the 27th Annual Pacific Coast Open. Really my only recent tournament that I can speak of. I mean, obviously I've been playing chess online for a long time, doing this channel for a few years. I think I hit about expert level 2000 plus back when I was about 13 or 14. Obviously now I'm 24, so it's been a very long time. And in that time, I've barely played any tournament chess. I mean, I did play a couple, maybe a few tournaments, if you combine 2019 and 2021 together. I think before that, I mean, I played in the tournament in 2016, and that was a rare occasion, right? I hit expert level in chess, and then I ended up deciding to kind of transfer into basketball more, and put more of my energy there, because I am 7'1", okay? And, I played a collegiate career in basketball. I just graduated. Now I'm kind of making a return back to competitive chess, over-the-board tournament chess. And I'm making it a goal to hit 2200 and hopefully become a national master. And I thought, hey, why not just post each and every single one of my games on the channel, win, loss, draw, etc. And, hopefully as I analyze these games, kind of explain my thought process and show you guys what I was thinking. Also showing my mistakes, right? I mean, I'm no Nakamura, but hopefully you guys can learn from both my good moves and my bad. So again, going into this tournament, I am rated at 2064 round one against FIDE master Alexander Krechetov, rated at 2334. Obviously a very strong player. Guys, this first round, in fact, the first 3 rounds of the tournament, I joined the 2-day schedule. So the games are very quick, 35 minutes apiece with a 10-second delay. Now, some of you are probably wondering, wait, I play bullet chess all the time. Why on earth would I say 35 minutes is fast? Well, guys, in an over-the-board tournament setting, 35 minutes apiece is, it goes quick. Okay, let's just say that. So a lot of these moves, we can't sit there and think 20, 30 minutes at key moments, but we just got to kind of trust our gut and calculate as much as we can. Here, my opponent playing with the white pieces, Krechetov, the FIDE master, starting off with d4. And I went, look, I mean, I haven't been playing in tournament chess for quite a while. I mean, I've covered a lot of different openings on this channel, but I haven't really been honing in on one opening for a long time. In fact, if there's any opening that I have been playing, it's been the Hippopotamus Defense. So why not go right into that and kind of avoid a lot of mainline theory, right? So I play this move of g6. Here, white continuing with c4. I continue by simply fianchettoing my bishop, and now we see the FIDE master taking full control of the center of the board with the 3 pawn presence, really trying to wipe out 5 squares out of that 5th rank. And okay, I just respond with the move of d6. I don't really care what white plays. I'm just going to continue to play my regular hippopotamus chess. We see the move bishop e2. I continue with b6, fianchetto my light squared bishop. And then at this point, okay, I'm playing knight e7, castle kingside. We see now the move of b4. White really trying to make up some space. And now as black, I just play this move of h6. And here we see white play the move of rook fd1. White making it clear that they're trying to put all of their effort into attacking on the queen side of the board. I respond by playing this move of f5, expanding on the king side. And notice, guys, there's actually a few different ideas that we have in the Hippo concerning pawn pushes. One of them is to play a move such as g5 or b5. Now, obviously, b5 wasn't an option because I would just lose the pawn right off the board, probably just to the knight. I mean, c takes b5 also gives white a much better position. g5 there, I ended up not wanting to go with that. And obviously, if I play a move like e5 instead of f5, white captures back, and this rook is going to become very active. So I ended up choosing, okay, let's use one of my flank pawns with this move of f5, putting pressure on e4. I think, a lot of times I see players, trying to figure out which flank pawn to use in the Hippo in certain setups. And I would say which pawn is less defended, right? I mean, this pawn on d4 is currently defended by 1, 2, 3 pieces. This pawn on e4 is only defended by 2. So let's make this the primary target. Here, white decides to capture off on f5, in which case I take back with this knight, attacking both the bishop and the pawn on d4. My opponent continues now with rook ac1, and I simply continue with queen e7. If you actually, plug this into a computer program, it's going to tell you that black has the edge here. The Hippopotamus Defense, very solid system, no matter what level you're playing it at. My opponent here continues now with a3, just a quiet move, simply trying to solidify his pawn on b4. And I now continue with this move of g5, continuing to expand on the king side. I'm looking at g4 ideas at any moment now, but white actually beats me to the punch. They don't want to allow this move g4 kicking my knight around, or at least they don't want to deal with it every single move. So we see this option of knight e1, really trying to control some of those light squares. And I would say here, guys, is where I made a big mistake. I mean, it's not fatal. It's not a blunder by any means. But guys, I played this move of e5. And after the game, Kretchetov told me, he told me he thought that this was a little bit premature. He thought that I should have maybe brought a rook into it, continued developing the pieces, and then played the move of e5. Well, it turns out that e5, just like he said, wasn't the right option here. It's kind of interesting because most of the time in the Hippo, we want to close things down. But guys, in this position, we actually want to break things open because we're the ones in control. We're the ones with the active bishops on g7 and b7. Now, obviously, I played this move e5, and he responded by just locking things down. Usually, we want this in the Hippo. But guys, in this case, let's just compare pieces for a moment. I mean, let's look at White's knights. This knight on c3, very solid piece. The knight on e1, I mean, it's, let's just face it, it's a little bit awkward. Obviously, White's rooks are very well placed. I think that is one of the that maybe advantages White has here. Of course, I do have this rook on f8, which is also very active. If you look at the bishops, I mean, I think this is really the big advantage here. White's bishops on e2 and e3. The bishop on e2 is okay. I mean, the bishop on e3 isn't looking that great, honestly. It's kind of a tall pawn hanging on to everything. On the other hand, look at my pieces, right? A very active knight on f5, 2 active bishops on g7, pouncing down on that centralized pawn, and this bishop on b7 pouncing down all the way to the pawn right in front of the king on g1. So in this case, instead of playing this move of e5, I should have went with an option such as c5. Now, a5 is also very playable. I was thinking about playing a5. I ended up obviously playing e5, but it actually turns out that c5 is the best move here, putting even more pressure in the center of the board. And the whole idea here is that, okay, I mean, White could take, but notice now we simply take back with the d-pawn. Our queen is out of the way, so this knight is not pinned to the queen any longer. If White continues to want to take the pawn again with a move like b takes c5, okay, we'll just take the bishop on e3, giving White an isolated pawn just like we have. And now we play this move of knight captures on c5. Very active knight, not going anywhere anytime soon. And as always, 2 very active bishops, an active rook on f8, pouncing down on this f-file, and here Black with the edge. So guys, again, most of the time, guys, in the Hippo, you actually want to lock things down in the center and then start to play, lock things down in the center, get a d4, e5 setup from White, or a e4, d5 setup from White, lock that up, and then start expanding with the flank pawns. But in this case, I'm the one that's locked and ready to go, so why not break things open? But instead I play this move e5, which allows White to simply close things down with d5. Again, not a blunder playing e5, but notice now my bishops simply are not as active, and White is sitting a lot more comfortable now on the queen side. And really, I mean, sure, the knight on e1 is awkward still, but it doesn't matter as much, right? So I continue now with this move of queen f7. Right now I'm actually threatening to capture on e3 and then continue with queen f2 check, which would simply give me a 1 game. I mean, just to cover that real quick, let's say White plays something like rook b1, right? I mean, just moving the rook over. In that case, I can simply snatch off this bishop, play queen f2, this king comes over, and now I have queen f1, and this would have been a game over. So obviously here, following the move of queen f7, I have a big threat, but White here simply stops it with bishop d3. Whole idea being, after taking the bishop, which I did, queen f2 is no longer an option. If I can get this move in, I'm going to win the game. And on top of that, queen f1 would win the game if it weren't for this bishop on d3, but here White is hanging on very well. And here again, I think I just played a little bit too passively here. I played the move of rook a e8. I was actually looking at this crazy move of e4, and I almost did it, but I was going, gosh, I mean, I haven't played serious chess like this in a decade, over the board chess. I mean, move 18, I'm just handing a FIDE master a 23-34 pawn. It seems as if this is a big mistake, but it actually turns out that this was the best move. I didn't end up going with it, but this would have given me the best chances. I mean, obviously the bishop can't capture back unless they want to lose in one move. And if knight takes e4 is played, sure, White is up a pawn, but we now have moves like knight e5, attacking the bishop, which, is very nice for us. We can always bring our rook into the action, play moves like bishop c8, and get our bishops on the light squares over here on the king side of the board. And here Black with a very active game, right? So sure, White is up a pawn, but we have activity to show for it. And notice, guys, this knight on e1 really isn't going anywhere anytime soon. So White here a little bit cramped and a little bit awkward. So I think I should have went with the move of e4 there. But instead, following the move of f takes e3, I continued with rook a e8. Again, not a blunder, But guys, in a position like this, I've locked things up, and I've already expanded on the king side very aggressively, but notice now that my light squares are becoming extremely weak. And we see this move of knight e4 from white, simply, just centralizing the knight right in the center of the board. I continue with knight f6, and now following knight f3, I play bishop c8. This is a key idea in the Hippo. Sometimes white will lock down your bishop, so okay, make it active. Play a move like bishop a6 in some positions. Obviously here, we want to play bishop c8, and I squares like f5 and g4. White here plays rook f1, and I go, okay, I'm going to get my queen the heck out of the way from that rook. And here white continues with knight captures check, bishop h7 check, and then finally bishop e4. White is not wanting me to get a chance to play the move e4, expanding in the center and giving this bishop on g7 some life. White here is trying to lock my pieces down. I played this move of rook ef8, and notice now the only piece that I have on the light square is this bishop on c8. This bishop on g7 might as well just be a pawn. It really has no future in this game if white just continues to put their pieces on squares like e4 or d5. We see white now continue with this move of knight d2, and I think here, black needs to start playing crazy looking chess, something like g4, right? Something like g4, h5, get this bishop involved. If this bishop simply stays locked down, black's just going to have a very awkward endgame and really a losing endgame against top tier competition. I continued by taking off this rook on f1. I was going, sure, I'm down material, right? I'm down material, so let's just try to trade off what we can. But even after that, obviously, we can trade as much as we want. I mean, this bishop just isn't going to get out. And notice now white has a great, a great clamp down on that square of f5, and I really can't do anything about it. I play this move of bishop d7. What else am I going to do? I'm trying to prevent a move like queen a4, attacking the pawn on a7 potentially. White here plays knight g3, and at this point, I'm just waiting around, right? I mean, it's just, how do I improve this? How do I improve this position, right? h5 can't be played. G4 at this point, I mean, something like knight f5 comes into action. I play this move of queen f8, trying to, defend f5 a little bit. Here, white tries to trade down. I go, no, I'm good. I play bishop e8. I mean, this is my good bishop, right? Why would I want to trade it off right now? White continues with bishop g6. I should have just brought this bishop back to d7 probably. I mean, even then, this is just a hard position from a practical standpoint to play. On top of that, I'm running down on time a little bit at this point. I mean, knight h5, queen e4 potentially. White, every single move is just going to keep slowly improving the positioning of their pieces in almost Karpovian type fashion, and it's going to be hard to work with. So here I decided to take off the bishop, and now out of desperation playing e4, which again, I should have played a long time ago. I should have played e4 when I had two rooks on f8 and e8 pouncing down on the white camp and a knight coming to e5. In this case, I still play e4, but I only have two pieces, and white actually doesn't even take it. I mean, white could take here and still be, much better, but it is going to give me some counterattacking chances. I mean, if white plays a move like knight takes e4, I have queen e7, queen e5, all of a sudden, I mean, this is becoming more of a game somewhat. White here trying to give me no hope and plays the move of knight f5. I continue with a5, trading off pawns, and notice now I'm actually one move away from having somewhat of a chance in this game, especially with the time controls. I wanted to play this move of a4. Now, if I can get this a4 move in, this would be very good for me, because at some point, if I could trade off queens, all of a sudden, this pawn on a3 is going to have nowhere to go, and it's going to become a big, big target. White here, however, doesn't want to allow me to play a4 and really lock this pawn in on a dark square, so we'd see the move of a4 from white. And now I'm actually in Zugzwang. I mean, Zugzwang, if you guys don't know what that is, it's basically no matter what you play, it's a bad move. In fact, Zugzwang is one of those things where it's like, hey, I don't want it to be my move. I want it to be your move, right? Which is very rare in chess. Usually, why wouldn't you want it to be your move? But in Zugzwang, no matter what you do, you give something away. And notice in this position, let's just go piece by piece, right? I mean, if I move this pawn to c6, okay, white takes it. If I play c5, okay, white can just take it right back, right? Or just leave the pawn on c5 and play a move like king h1. I mean, white could always just go back and forth here and just wait for me to have to move one of my major pieces. If I play a move like h5, this queen just captures back. If I play the move g4, I also lose the pawn there potentially. But really the main thing here is our major and minor pieces, right? So even if we do play a move like c5 here, white might be good to just play a move like g3, king g2, king g1, and just wait for me to have to move my king, bishop, or queen. Whole idea being, if I move my king, white has knight takes h6 with check. Notice that my bishop would be pinned, at that point. If I move the bishop, all of a sudden this pawn on h6 is no longer defended. And if I ever move this queen, I mean, let's say we move it to like g8, okay, all of a sudden I'm not defending the pawn on h6. The only way for me to defend the pawn on h6 and move my queen is by playing queen f6, which is what I go with in the game. But here white is simply able to capture back and take on h6. And sure, you know, at first sight it may seem like, okay, maybe black has a chance here. I mean, black's only down a pawn, right? And we have a, you know, bishop on the board. You know, maybe we can sacrifice our bishop later on in this game and, you know, get a king and knight versus king kind of draw. But notice what the pawn structure looks like. White earlier played this move of a4. All of white's pawns are on light squares, so this bishop simply cannot capture anything. I mean, we could try to attack the pawn on e3, but of course white just defends it in one single move. So guys, at this point, this is just losing. I play this move of king g7. White here continuing to pick off my pawns like candy. I play bishop e5. White here very patient with, you know, king f2. Nothing was wrong with taking this pawn e4, but I think white, again, just from a practical standpoint, not trying to let me get into this game at all. I continue now g4, trying to play aggressively on the king side. Notice if I didn't play king f5 and I played bishop takes h2, all of a sudden g3 is played and my bishop gets trapped, right? So I can't do that. I play this move of king f5. We see knight g3. I get my king involved on the king side, and sure, I mean, at this point, check. I get a pawn, but white here doesn't respond with knight e6 check and then taking the pawn on c7, but instead this move of knight c6, right? Taking this pawn on a5 instead. Knight e6 is very easy. It seems like, okay, get the fork, get the pawn. Even then, white is better, but it does give me a chance. Guys, in this case, however, I mean, white's just going to take my pawn on a5, get out of the way, and simply march down the board. I mean, it's just going to take forever for me to get, you know, my bishop to be able to defend that pawn. So in this position, I resigned the game. So guys, rough start to the tournament. You know, I went with the hippo. I think, you know, I think really the key moment for me at least. You could argue that at one point I should have played e4 for sure. But I think it was at this point, after this move of knight e1. Guys, white is going backwards right now. They're retreating. You know, I don't need to lock things up. I don't need to lock both of my bishops up. Notice how active both of my bishops are at the moment, right? I mean, why would I lock this thing up with e5 and d5? Why not play c5 and put absolute crushing pressure on that pawn on d4. In fact, according to the engine, white here needs to play a move like d takes or b takes the pawn c5, in which case, okay, I'm simply just going to capture back with either one of those pawns, get my rook involved. I think I was a little bit worried about the fact that white already had rooks on d1 and c1, but notice, by playing this move c5, c5 is no longer possible for white to play. So this rook on c1 would have been locked down anyways, as well as this queen on c2. This rook on d1 would have been active, but my queen is out of the line of fire. So guys, c5 was definitely the way to go. Just keep this in mind. If you're a Hippo player, you know, most of the time you want to lock things down, right? In an early position, lock things down, and at that point start to, you know, kind of get King's Indian attack type ideas on the king side of the board or queen side of the board. But in this case, guys, I mean, I'm just the one with the space, really, on the king side at least, and, you know, active piece placement. So I should have tried to break it open even more. Thanks for watching this video, and tune in tomorrow for a recap of Game 2.